Agent Morris with the NSA.
There is something real here.
Did you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the first-hand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General. Biologics came to some of these recoveries.
Those could represent exquisite new adversary technology.
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
The government is covering up some level of its knowledge and understanding about what some of those things are.
The Soul Foundation, which just announced a new initiative for UFO research and policy.
It's nuts, man. I mean, we're just small-town buds who saw a UFO in the woods. I mean, now we're hanging out with the government.
Wow. What floor were you guys on?
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis. Welcome to another live edition of Anomaly-NOW, straight out of Austin, Texas. This is the weekly live media news roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Anomaly Archives, aka Scientific Anomaly Institute. You can find out more about us over at our website, anomalyarchives.org. And we are back streaming through our traditional Anomaly Archives YouTube channel, among our other outlets. Sorry for the late start there. Just getting prepped for the show stories I was going to talk about tonight. So let's dive right in. It is Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. And most of these links you will be able to find over at our Flipboard. That's flipboard.com/@Anomaly-Archives. And of course, you can find links to that over at our website, anomalyarchives.org. Let's see. Well, yes, there's the website, and there is the Flipboard. Oh, someone else has taken control. Thank you, Victor. Yeah, so I did want to just briefly comment that I got to see this Life with Ghosts When Weird is Also Wonderful documentary. It's actually a throwback, an old documentary that hasn't, I guess, seen wide or any release. Thank the algorithm gods for putting it in my path. They knew I'd be interested in it because among the many interesting intellectuals and scientists and researchers on the panel of experts is Jeff Kripal of Rice University, who, of course, is well known for his, I would say, legitimizing in the academic world of the importance of weird, high strangeness encounters, the importance of the experiencer to strange phenomena like UFOs, UAP, paranormal, spiritual, etc. As a religious scholar, he's well equipped to talk about that material from a historical perspective and from a more multidisciplinary anthropological perspective. And I watched did a donation. They're doing a fund drive. Apparently this documentary was produced back in, I think, the early 2013, 2014 period. And it chronicles the coming to grips with grief of a family who lost their husband, their father, their son. So the mother, the wife, and the children left behind grapple with the loss of their father, husband, son. And it brings up some interesting techniques. You can go to the website lifewithghosts.com. They are trying to raise funds to produce a version that they can air on television to reach a wider audience. As I say, it's obviously that was produced quite some time ago. Not exactly sure why it hasn't seen wide release. I'm betting it had maybe something to do with the types of stock footage and or audio in the original version, which you can donate money and watch there. There's a trailer there at the website that drew me in. As most of us will have to deal with grief in our life, I think its place in the paranormal is worthy of reflection and contemplation. And And I think that projects like this are worth your support. I'm trying to remember the name of the technique. There's two techniques that are described and shown in this documentary. One, a more quote unquote scientific approach, which is induced after death communication, IADC. I haven't done that much research on it, but it reminds me of some other techniques for dealing with trauma that I think are very interesting. And apparently this study was done at the UNT, University of North Texas, and they go into all that. But they also show the mother of the deceased and how she grappled with it. And in fact, I believe the movie is based on her book, and she does automatic writing and communicates with her deceased husband and her deceased son. And they go into all kinds of dynamics about how that affects the family, the widow and their daughters. You might find it interesting. I think you might want to give it a try. Moving right along, I did want to draw folks' attention to one of the latest videos. I think this was posted probably a week ago. I don't think I mentioned it in last week's show, but it's the Inside the Black Vault video with John Greenwald. I think I have that pulled up right here. This is, if for those really going for the nitty-gritty to deal with David Grusch and his claims, of course, John Greenwald over at the Black Vault, as always, doing his FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests. He's gotten all the communications between Sean Kirkpatrick of AARO, former head of AARO, and folks like Christopher Mellon and David Grusch, and to try to explicate this whole he said, which one of them is lying. And I'll just say, as Greenwald says, here's the evidence, review it, you decide who's telling the truth. I'll just say both sides seem a little disingenuous at times. That's my takeaway. But another point worth making, I think this video is about an hour and 45 minutes long from John Greenwald. So it is a deep dive, but he presents the information that he received on the FOIA request in chronological order to try to give you a sense of how this unfolded and what the communications were between Grusch and people trying to get him into AARO to speak to Sean Kirkpatrick or their representatives of AARO. But the other point I did want to note is that Greenwald makes the comment somewhere, I couldn't find the exact location, but he criticizes Lou Elizondo for tweeting out comments to his massive amount of followers about the fact that the released in these documents were signal communications, as in the supposedly private encrypted Signal app between, I believe, Christopher Mellon and Sean Kirkpatrick. And there's just, it's interesting, that these kinds of things would come out, and he points out that this is not the first time this has happened, and nor is it all that untoward. But Lou Elizondo made kind of a inflammatory statement. I don't remember exactly what it was, but John Greenwald alludes to it in this video, basically just saying, hey, I think it's a little, I don't know, what's the word, dangerous that to say such inflammatory things that might, with that many followers, influence somebody among those followers who might be a little unhinged to take action. And of course, that has been part of the narrative of Sean Kirkpatrick saying he was being threatened and that his home was being, one article said, broken into, but it had just been visited by, or somebody had been outside, a ufologist, somebody interested in disclosure outside his home. And obviously these kinds of things, I think it's just kind of, it goes to the whole, like Alex Jones thing of like, when you've got that massive of an audience, you're that much more likely to have a small percentage of the population who are unhinged in that audience. And it should be considered the possible influence that could be made on folks who are already on the edge. But anyway, very interesting information there, documentation. Who knows where it'll all lead, but you might want to check that out. Moving right along, I want to talk about keeping with this whole what's going on with the disclosure thing. We've got Micah Hanks doing more great reporting here on his podcast, the Micah Hanks Program, for April 30th, 2024, incident at Eglin Air Force Base. And there's two articles. There's this podcast episode of his show, Micah Hanks program, as well as this article over at thedebrief.org. This well-known UFO debunker is skeptical of the DoD's recent investigations into aerial mysteries. Here's why. Now, so the infamous debunker is Mick West, who is critical of, as are most people, of the AARO report. And in this podcast and this debrief article, the focus is on this Eglin Air Force Base sighting of 4 objects that were seen on radar and perceived visually, I believe. And all this came about because of, I believe, Matt Gaetz' testimony during one of the testimonies in Congress. Let's see. The incident, initially revealed publicly by Florida Representative Matt Gaetz during a hearing by the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border and Foreign Affairs last summer, became the subject of a FOIA request that revealed a drawing of the object made by the pilot, but offered a few additional details. That remained the case until last month, when an official report by the Pentagon's AARO office was released that revealed images of the object photographed by the military pilot for the first time. According to its report, AARO's team labeled the case resolved, quote unquote, after the official government office tasked with the investigation of UAP concluded that the craft in the images had likely been some kind of lighter-than-air object. In other words, it was most probable that the object was a balloon, but not just any balloon. One of these commercial balloon lighting rigs, something I actually reported on back in my 1990s Elphys zine days. But anyway, and the article mentions how Sean Kirkpatrick, in one of his interviews, talked about this case, and it all comes down to basically the AARO office seemingly not doing any really good research. And Sean Kirkpatrick apparently mentions a specific company, I believe based in Florida, that is known for these, and made the claim that these balloons sometimes get untethered and escape, and that maybe that's what they saw. Well, as Micah Hanks posits, well, how likely is it that 4 of these, if the reports of the radar and the visual are accurate, how likely is it that 4 of these would escape simultaneously and maintain a formation, a chevron formation in 80-mile-an-hour winds? I don't really know all the specifics of this case, but I get his point, and Mick West is making it too. Now, Mick West, of course, is mostly just criticizing the lack of transparency in the AARO report. Like, okay, well, what was their investigation? What did they? What was their process? And he criticizes that, and also simultaneously promotes his own crowdsourcing approach, which I don't think is a bad thing. And in fact, my experience as a witness within the Roswell Slides research group, I think, provided me a great example of how small groups of people with different types of expertise can really do good work. And he basically is suggesting that they really should have had some other teams as part of their research effort, and that at the very least, the historical report that was issued should have been vetted and edited, because he points out, like everybody has, that it's really, really bad, with a lot of some say minor, some say major errors in it. But if I'm not mistaken, I was listening to the April 30th incident at Eglin Air Force Base, Micah Hanks program episode, and I believe in that episode, Micah comments that I believe it was Micah, reached out to the company, and they claimed this inflatable lighting company, and they claimed that no, in fact, they don't know of any of these ever escaping. Now, I don't know if they just rent these out, or if people can buy them, and perhaps somebody who's bought them could have them and they could escape and they wouldn't know about it. Would somebody who had purchased these and accidentally let one loose, which could be a hazard to aircraft, admit to that? I don't know. But again, this is just more grist for the mill that AARO is just not doing that good of a job so far. That even arch skeptic Mick West. Now, speaking of arch skeptic Mick West, and people making maybe not unfounded claims, but just perhaps doing more damage than good. Oh, good? Oh, yes, the Good Trouble Show with, what's this guy's name? Matt Ford, excuse me. The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. Look at that. Like, okay, he's just making fun of Mick West doing an old, like, what's the anime character hair? Like he's going to make a run on Area 51. This is a 3-minute screed by Matt Ford, just really lambasting Mick West. And I know Mick West is the new Phil Klass, and there's plenty of people who just hate him and think he's the devil, or that, as Matt Ford, I believe, is intimating here, or outright saying that Mick is funded by the Pentagon and is basically working for the dark forces that are trying to keep the truth from us. But at the same time, I'll do a little criticizing of Matt Ford besides criticizing him for this, because it's like Greenwald was criticizing Lou Elizondo. Be careful. Your words have an effect, and almost over 5,500 people or views have happened with this 3-minute screed where you're basically alleging that Mick West is a disinformer, debunker working for the government and for the deep state or something. I don't know. And, I entertain all kinds of crazy ideas, including those kinds of ideas. So, but I think you should be a little more careful with a large audience. But even on another recent episode of the Good Trouble Show, I forget which one it was, but he interviewed somebody talking about consciousness and its connections to the UFO phenomenon. It's like, duh. And he literally, I think early in the video, said something like, well, I'm a newcomer to this, and it never occurred to me that there could be something deeper than just nuts and bolts craft. Not his exact words, but I hope you get the gist of my point, that there are so many newcomers, and there's newcomers doing good work. And I watch episodes of the Good Trouble Show. Sometimes I really enjoy some of the guests and the information they have on, but it just gets me when folks who seem so ready to say they know what's going on, and they really just don't have, the years of experience and history of watching these stories unfold time and time again, and have done that kind of deeper research that would make you go, yeah, gee, I think consciousness is connected to this phenomena somehow. And I know there's criticisms of talk of consciousness and quantum physics and all that as being less than scientific. A lot of skeptics would criticize that kind of talk. Whatever. I don't care. All right, moving quickly right along. Something much better. Ooh. Jacques Vallée and Jeffrey Kripal challenge the limits of knowledge. What kind of website is this? It says Frame? It's documentjournal.com. I think it's a fashion website. What a strange place to have an interview, a discussion between Jacques Vallée and Jeffrey Kripal, with interjections by the host and interviewer Drew Zeba, Zeiba. This is over at documentjournal.com. It just came out yesterday, and some nice photographs, arty, black and white, studio shenanigans fun with the photographs. This is a really nice interchange. I know there's a lot of criticism these days of Jacques, especially related to his interest and endorsement of the Trinity case. But as I've said previously on this show and other shows this past year or so, after his reception at the Saul Foundation, the inaugural event, I really feel like this is the year of Jacques Vallée and the UFO. And by the year of, I mean 2023, 2024. But I don't really know anything about this website or its reach or intended audience even. But this is a really good article, I think. And I'll try to read a few bits here. There are some choice things, but it just starts off. Scientist and scholar discusses UFO sightings, AI utopias, and top secret projects for documents, spring-summer 2024 issue. And of course, leads off with the reference to the December 2017 New York Times article, the Grusch hearings, NPR and other outlets carrying this, of course, giving some background on Jacques Vallée. And it says, a principal exponent of taking UFOs seriously since the 1950s, Vallée doesn't doubt that these contacts happen. His research, as published in books such as Anatomy of a Phenomenon, Passport to Magonia, and The Edge of Reality, that one that rarely gets cited, The Edge of Reality, shows humans have attested related experiences for centuries. Take Celtic fairies, whose stories claim abducted humans for reproductive purposes and left magic circles. He's worked on classified projects, helped make the first digital maps of Mars, and inspired the character played by Francois Truffaut in the film CE3K. He's dug in the dirt. He's looked through telescopes. He's interviewed countless witnesses. He's also, as a teen in France, saw what presented itself to him as a saucer. I say, quote unquote, presented, because through his combination of scientific, historical, and interpersonal research, for much of his career, Vallée has suggested that rather than beings from space, UFO witnesses might be facing interdimensional humans or some other such phenomena in disguise. UFOs' radical weirdness, he argues, suggests our current modes of understanding, scientific, political, spiritual, aren't prepared to handle these experiences. Quote, "Are the UFOs windows rather than objects?" Vallée wrote in 1969. By this, he means that there is something bewildering in their nature, that whatever they are, another reality lurks behind the experience of them. That there's contact, but the fantastical visions inflected by people's cultural specificities may not be the things themselves. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. Perhaps, he's suggested, the UFOs are even intentionally deceptive. Perhaps they are teaching us to look beyond this deception and into the mechanism of perception itself. Then there's some information about Jeff Kripal and, of course, all he's contributed to the scene, including his book that covers Jacques Vallée as an author of the impossible, which, of course, then leads ultimately, thank goodness, to the archives of the impossible over in Houston at Rice University. The ending of the introduction reads, "The UFO," Kripal writes in his essay on Vallée, is, quote, "a technological Kwan in the sky, a metaphysical joke, dead serious when meditated upon. This joke," both men suggest, "may offer an entirely new way of seeing that we take to be our reality. This meditation doesn't end with, but begins with, such as of yet unexplained phenomena." Over the course of 3 conversations, condensed for length and clarity, Vallée and Kripal breach the illusory surface of the present world in search of a vertical dimension. It goes on to talk about Vallée's having witnessed, as he said, this classic flying saucer with a cupola, a clear sphere, like top on it as a child when he was 15, witnessed by, I believe, his mother and also a friend at a different location through binoculars, confirming what he had seen, going on to be an astronomer and hear all the reports coming in from the people and trying to explain to civilian witnesses what they might have seen, and having access at that point in his life to the French Air Force files. Jacques says, "As you may know, when I was about 15, I saw something that wasn't explained at the time. My mother saw it first. It was over the little town where we lived. A bright afternoon, very clear blue sky, a daylight disk. It was just standing there about half a kilometer away, and it was very clearly a disk with some superstructure. The next day, I spoke to a friend of mine who'd seen it from his house. He had looked at it with binoculars, and he drew it at my request. It was exactly what I had seen. So I had the advantage of having a proof of concept very early, and I felt that if I was going to be a scientist, here was a problem. For a while, I pushed it out of my mind, which is what many witnesses do. This was the 50s, and many new airplanes were coming up, and so on. I almost convinced myself that I had seen a prototype of some new device that would become common. Well, it didn't become common. A few years later, I was working at the Paris Observatory, tracking the early satellites like Echo and others, and computing orbits, which was my first exposure to serious computers. Working for the government, we were getting observations from the public that we had to respond to. Some of those matched what I had seen. I reinvestigated the whole thing. I had access to the files of the French Air Force at that time and found that, yes, there was a mystery. Astronomers didn't want to talk about it because of their scientific reputation, which is still true today, by the way. There was a lot of data that the public didn't know about. And I thought, well, I have a computer. I can start looking at it. There's a lot of here. It's about a 30-minute read, but there are some other little things in this article, this interview, this discussion between Jeff, Vallée, and Drew. Vallée says, "What is happening is not at all what we thought would happen once there was recognition of the problem. We thought there would be an opening to the scientific community and the public. That's not what's happening. Jeffrey and I just came from a meeting at the Eglin Institute with a number of scientists who are involved and have very high security clearances on subjects that the public is not told about. And what the public is seeing about UFOs on television and in newspapers and on the internet is entirely driven by military concerns. We're rushing into interpretations at various high levels, including Congress, on false data. It's partial data behind multiple shields of secrecy. This is not disclosure. My wife and I have spent 2 months recently in France and England where things are happening now because they are beginning to realize that the U.S. has been lying. We know it's all politics. The group in Washington within the DoD that has been charged with looking at the problem, the AARO, All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, a U.S. government office funded in 2022 to investigate UFOs, it turns out has signed a $2 million contract with a company that is concerned with rumor control, essentially to stop people from stirring up the public with the stories about what UFOs may be. So this is a signal to many of us that the subject is about to go into a new phase of secrecy. You are not going to know what is going to be found when the scientists in those projects are looking at cadavers of aliens that have been recovered. You're not going to hear what has been found about the propulsion system of the 8 or 9 or 10 crafts that have been retrieved, and you're not going to be hearing about the 90% of the data, which is mostly outside the United States and is not military data. So to me, the last 6 months have been a big backtracking. A number of my colleagues are leaving the field. Of course, Drew tries to pull them out and say, are you saying that those things are true or that you believe them? And he's like, no, look, I'm not saying it's extraterrestrial. I'm saying that's possible, but that I think there's something more. But, Jeff, of course, echoes what Vallée and others have been saying that needs to be said in the face of this militant military industrial complex perspective of what we are being fed. And before I go there, I just want to reiterate what he's saying echoes what John Greenwald has been saying all along, that far from a new openness by the government on the subject of UFOs, what we are seeing is a clamp down, that he is having a harder and harder time getting the most basic of information that he would have been able to get easily in years past, in decades past, and that it's just getting worse. Jeffrey Kripal. What I see in the UFO phenomena is that people are always trying to reduce it or to return it to something they understand, which in this case happens to be physics. And I think that's what you're talking about, Jacques, or it's some kind of social mechanism. It fills some psychological or social function. So they want to reduce everything to nature or to society. But if you listen to the witnesses, what they're experiencing cannot be reduced to what we think of as nature today or what we think of as society today. Something else is happening. To answer your earlier question, this is what's missing in the discourse today. They're not listening to the experiencers. We're just going on and on about military threats and future technologies. In other words, we're reducing it to our science and our technology and our politics. Check it out. There's so much more I could read from there, but that's enough. I keep recommending it. Forbidden Science, every volume. Volume 5 is the current one by Jacques Vallée. I swear I take so many notes from these books of his. There's so much import in there, plus just it's always a joy to read Vallée's romantic, inspired love for life. But to get that sense of what it was like to be in these times of these earlier epochs of the UFO scene, I think is really worth your while. In that book, in this book of Forbidden Science, I swear almost every case that is obliquely alluded to in the AARO historical report that they all dismiss, it's all in here. You get to grapple with Vallée talking about his conversations with Eric Davis, Edgar Mitchell, Bob Bigelow, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, not Gary Nolan yet, but John Alexander, all the people who have been these insiders who AARO says have been the ones pushing this agenda all along, and the alleged misunderstanding about advanced secret projects that have nothing to do with ETs or UFOs. And that may be true, but it's all there. Vallée was talking about this, writing this down in his journal. He was experiencing it as part of his daily life, researching these things and hearing the stories and always being skeptical, perhaps not skeptical enough for our skeptic friends, sorry, but completely random aside. Among the things you'll find when you read his books are little tidbits. I find so many new authors, new music, new ideas and books that I'd never heard of. And one of them, The Mystery of the Jet-Propelled Couch, is a chapter in apparently a very famous book by a psychiatrist whose book, The 50-Minute Hour, features a chapter. It's all about this psychiatrist's different patients, his most interesting patients. And this one particular patient possibly was a scientist at either Sandia or Lawrence Livermore, one of these advanced Southwestern labs. And this person was sent to the doctor because he was often found muttering to himself about alien worlds and seemed disconnected from his daily work and life. And the author, Lindner, Lindner, what's the full name? Robert Lindner, who also, I believe, best known for his 1944 book, Rebel Without a Cause, which, of course, I'm sorry, I've never seen the movie. But the subtitle of this book, I don't think I ever had heard this. The subtitle of the book, Rebel Without a Cause, is The Hypnoanalysis of a Criminal Psychopath. Okay, sorry, to color me ignorant. I was hypnoanalysis ever part of the movie? Makes me want to see it even more if it is. Probably wasn't. But there was a character, the case of Kirk Allen, this scientist. Let's see. The most famous of the 5 cases was that of Kirk Allen, who Lindner described in the book's final chapter, The Jet-Propelled Couch. According to Lindner, Allen, a pseudonym, was one of Lindner's patients born in 1918 who was a physicist at, quote, X Reservation, a, quote, government installation in the Southwest, probably Los Alamos National Laboratory. Allen had made important contributions during World War II, probably as part of the Manhattan Project. After Allen's superiors observed him chronically spacing out on the job while muttering about his travels to other planets, they sent him to Lindner's Baltimore office for long-term treatment. The gist of this article is basically the author of this article was like so many trying to discover after the fact who was Kirk Allen, who was the actual identity of him. And at some point, for over a year, Lindner tried to cure Allen of his delusion using every conventional method at his disposal. Lindner says he had a sudden flash of inspiration. In order to separate Kirk from his madness, it was necessary for me to enter his fantasy and from that position to pry him loose from the psychosis. This doesn't address what I was trying to find. Let's see. The writer of this article invokes John Carter of Mars as possibly the source of the inspiration for Kirk Allen, but later finds that, quote, it wasn't until 14 years later that I learned that the answer was not so simple. I came across an article online titled Behind the Jet-Propelled Couch, Cordwainer Smith and Kirk Allen by Alan C. Elms, which originally ran in the May 2002 issue of the New York Review of Science Fiction. It was written by Alan C. Elms, a psychologist and biographer of science fiction writer Cordwainer Smith, pen name of a political scientist and psychological war expert named Paul M.A. Linebarger. In my own meanderings, I had come across references to this individual for other reasons. Anyway, I just found this very interesting. It's just kind of an aside, one of the weird rabbit holes I found just while reading Forbidden Science Journal, Volume 5 of Jacques Vallée. The last note by this writer, Mark Fraunfelder. Interestingly, Elms was Stanley Milgram's research assistant when he conducted his infamous obedience to authority electroshock experiment. All right. Well, another link that I think folks might find interesting. I had forgotten about this. There's a article over at kview.com. It's a local news site here in Austin. The woman buried over 10,000 years ago near modern day Leander. This is about the Leanderthal lady. On a wet and cold day in December 1982, archaeologists are called out to investigate buried human bones found deep in the ground where construction crews with the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, were building Ranch to Market Road 1431. Soon it became clear that what the archaeologists uncovered was an extraordinary discovery, the oldest intact human skeleton ever recovered in the U.S., carbon dated to between 10,000 and 13,000 years ago. The carefully recovered and removed skeleton belonged to a woman who was about 5 feet, 3 inches tall, and probably around 30 years old. She had been carefully and respectfully buried with some tools and a shark tooth. Anyway, this is just a reflection article on, hey, remember when she was named Leanne after Leander, where she was found. Of course, this is long before the local natives were driven away by colonists here. And the article kind of reflects on that. It's kind of an interesting bit of history there, local flair. But lastly, and this I just kind of as a reflection on thoughts about Jacques Vallée's history, experience, and often the warnings and the psychological warfare underpinnings of the UFO phenomena and people's beliefs in the paranormal, etc. Over at the Associated Press, apnews.com. Faceless people, invisible hands. New Army video aims to lure recruits for psychological operations. And sure enough, warfare is evolving. And there's a video over at the PsyOps YouTube channel for the 4th PsyOp group called Ghosts in the Machine. There was the video 2 years ago that features samples of media imagery. And this one being from the video from 2 years ago, which has garnered over 1.6 million views. And I don't know. And so they've posted recently a Ghost in the Machine 2, a follow-up to that recruitment video. And it's got some very powerful imagery. Psychological warfare So it's an important aspect of trying to understand all of these phenomena and the way we're manipulated. And I should probably not say more because I just get so incensed by the idea of the military-industrial complex trying to manipulate you, me, our family, our friends, our loved ones, the enemy. But yeah, here's just some more clips from the most recent video, Behind Every Emotion, Invisible Hands. No, what harm could it be to use ghost imagery and talk of psychological warfare? Anyway, that's over at apnews.com. It'll be in the show links for tonight's show. Thank you all for joining us. This has been Smiles Lewis with Anomaly Now, live weekly news roundup for the 501c nonprofit Anomaly Archives. Thank you for joining us. Good night.